All right, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to today, Tuesday, November 19th, Legal Contracts and Policy Meeting. It is 5:36. I am Dr. Renee Molnar, Chair. We have Co-Chair Sykes in attendance, Board Member Reverend Harrison in attendance. And with that, I think we can begin. We have a full agenda today, starting with item 1, the approval of the minutes. Any discussions or corrections to the minutes?
Madam Chair, so move.
All right. Thank you. And so now, everyone that has a packet, we can move on to our next item 2, public participation. We have nobody signed up to participate, so we move on to item 3, policy readings. We have one item from our last meeting here for a first read. It is in your packet, policy 8510, wellness. If you move to the Sorry, it's printed. Second page? Yeah. There it is. Here we go. Top of the back of the second page. The only thing that is different from our current wellness policy is we've added number 8 at the top. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Molnar. Also, number 6 at the top of page 2 now says there's an addition. With peers that supports their physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development is also an addition.
Okay. Thank you for that. So in number 6, we are saying recess. So it already said schools are discouraged from using daily recess as a period of punishment, denying the student opportunity for physical activity with peers, and we're adding in the first read that supports their physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development, and also adding number 8, recognized for its educational benefits. Recess is a pedagogical activity and pivotal component of core instruction that positively impacts academic performance. So with that, is there any discussion on wellness policy 8510?
No, Madam Chair, I have no comments.
Okay, so with that, I move that we move this policy to the next scheduled board meeting for a second reading to continue with the procedure to get this permanently on board.
Okay. So moved.
Thank you. And now we are at section 4, 4.01, restorative practices report.
Hello, my name is Nicole Hassan. I work as an MTSS coordinator in the Office of Student and Family Services. So we have been working through restorative practices in our district for many years. One of the current initiatives that are happening is through a Stop School Violence grant, working in 3 schools in Garfield cluster to be what they call a whole school change model. Meaning that we have a coach from the International Institute of Restorative Practices that comes and does a whole building training and then comes multiple times over a 3-year period to help coach through that process for universal. So one of the things that the teachers learned this year is about effective statements and effective questioning, just essentially changing mindset of doing things with students versus to or for students. And so that would be statements that are like I statements, where it's like, I feel frustrated when you don't come to school prepared, right? Like just the phrasing of how students are being addressed when different issues arise. So that is one level, but we on multiple levels then also have restorative practices happening in the elementary schools with students who receive, we have climate team members who do a lot of restorative practices with students in the moment, as well as when they return from some sort of out-of-school consequence. Same at the middle and high school. We have administrators often have meetings with the students when a behavior happens is part of the consequence, as well as following an out-of-school consequence. So our goal, working with the International Institute of Restorative Practices through this grant, is to get a team trained to be trainers, and then kind of work that through the district as well. However, through them, we're going to have administrators trained this summer so that we all have the same foundational understanding, because restorative practices has many different platforms and different ideologies within the same context, so we just want to make sure that we all are speaking the same language. This is directly connected to the strategic plan in Cornerstone 1 as far as the MTSS process. So restorative practices does live in all 3 tiers, but right now our focus is on that universal, creating an environment where students feel that they are affirmed and they have a voice, and restorative practices is a strategy or a tool to help teachers through that.
Is there any discussion or questions at this time?
Thank you for that information. Who chose the model? How was the model chosen? And I'll let you answer that first.
Well, with the grant itself, we looked at district data the year prior to applying for that grant as far as where the most need was. We identified through various different data points, climate surveys, as well as discipline, as well as attendance, and identified the schools within that cluster. International Institute of Restorative Practices is a international program that's been, it's evidence-based, and so that's something that we have used in our district. I think it was Bookdale and East clusters in the past, as well as at I Promise, as it's just a really well-rooted program based on the foundational pieces as far as that, in addition to the strategies. So it's quality. The whole school model is one of their programs, and it's a 3-year program. And so since our grant was 3 years, we just kind of made sense to have them stick with us through that whole time.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other comments or discussion on the presentation?
No, Madam Chair.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for this update. Okay. Moving on, we have policy 402, 5200 attendance. I believe this was a Neola update.
Yes, thank you. This is a Neola update. So you'll see there are some changes that have been made to things like pronouns, but most importantly, let me figure out what page this is on, actually. Give me 1 second. On the second page, the back, there's information about excessive absences and also a heading for religious expression days. So this is to reflect state law, and that's all been incorporated. Dr. Molnar, would you like me to read through the religious expression days is quite lofty, but happy to go through it, but it's updated to reflect state law.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like kind of just a real quick overview of what is expected of the schools with the religious expression days.
So there's quite a bit in here, but the principal can approve of up to 3 religious expression days per school year after a request from the parent or guardian. So this is kind of lays out what the building folks should do and how they should handle religious expression dates for the students. There are certain provisions with regard to accommodations, and that's in that second paragraph there.
So, and I have not read all of this. So, under the religious expression days, are the schools expected to provide a space, or is it off campus?
No,
what is this?
Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
it's the attendance policy. So these are excused absences.
Oh, excuse
So
me.
they don't count
Okay.
towards. Sorry, that wasn't very clear.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the schools are expected to acknowledge that students can have up to 3 days whereby they're saying there is something dealing with their religion that they choose to go to. That's in addition to everything, in addition to everything else.
That's correct. And then also, with regard to excessive absences, above, you'll see there are provisions about consecutive and non-consecutive medical absences. So that's to address when a student would have excused absence with or without a note, but a phone call from a parent or guardian, and when truancy starts to kick in. So after 10 days, regardless, truancy becomes on the table. And then we added as well that consecutive medical absences of 5 days or more will require a medical note from a doctor or a healthcare provider.
Okay. Okay.
One thing that is different about these, and we used to get with the strike through, so then we would see what was new. And so I personally found that really helpful. I don't know if other people found that helpful, but in the future, that would be nice. Is this strike through not in this now? So this could be considered a first read? Is that part of the intention?
I think so, and I think that the intention was just to have something clean and easy or to go through. I don't know. There's also a lot of options that are included in the strike-through one sometimes, and it can get a little bit confusing. I don't know if the administration wanted to speak any further to providing the additional ones, but that's something that we do have.
But to clarify, because this is in discussion, but I know this is a Neola update, and having the Neola updates in a timely fashion is something that we're trying to do. So is this something that you would like to consider today as a first read?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would recommend that we consider this for a first read. One change on the first page, G, really lays out the modification from state law regarding the religious expression days. And then, as council indicated, the religious expression days from the bill really is laid out here, but we would ask that, yes, this would be a first read from the committee.
All right, so now to the committee, would we like to consider this as a first read?
Yes, that's fine. I don't see any additions that we would make, so it could be a first read, or it could move along a little faster, if you like.
All right, so as this is a first read, committee, are we ready to move this to the board agenda for full board review for a second read?
Yes, I think that would be fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion on 5,200 attendance?
Nope.
Reverend Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at this. I did not see the attendance policy, but I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place. If not, then I will call you to get on the agenda. But I did have an occasion to call the school earlier this year because my neighbor's kids actually were put off a school bus. So they were actually on the bus, and they were put off the bus, but they weren't suspended from school. So they missed 7 days of school because they were put off the bus. And so I'm not, do we have anything to address how we get kids to school? How we keep their attendance intact if we put them off of a bus?
Right, so I would probably need to know specifics around that particular situation. And so I don't know if there was an incident was it a discipline situation? Like, I don't know. I would have to know specifics around why that happened.
Well, and I guess I'm not speaking specifically, but I'm saying if someone is put off a bus but not suspended from school, that creates an attendance issue. We put kids are suspended from the bus but not school. And if they can't get to school, again, that's an attendance issue. So I don't want to get into the specifics of that situation, just the fact that how do we get kids to school that are suspended off a bus?
If they are suspended from the bus, not school, they're still required to attend school, but we don't have, like, there's not a secondary mode of transportation. If they are suspended from the bus, they're not suspended from school. So, yeah, just in the time I've been here, I've not seen anything where if you're suspended from the bus, we have another way of getting you to school. No.
Can we take a look at that?
Oh, I'm not saying we
So
can't.
that's what I said. I can't even,
mean-
I'm not going to speak to the situation because I don't know what those specifics were. But we will definitely work with Family and Student Services and Transportation and look at situations because students are expected to follow the code of student behavior on the bus. And if they're causing a safety issue, then we have to make sure that that is being addressed and that our parents and guardians are working with us. And so that's something that we can continue to talk about as it relates to when there are incidents like that. And so we can definitely have a conversation and then get back to you on what that would look like if a person doesn't have an alternative way to get to school if they're suspended from the bus.
Yeah, and that is the issue. Okay, so I mean, understanding that they should follow the rules, understand that parents should help us enforce rules, but the issue becomes it's an attendance issue. We're creating. Well, we're not creating, but it creates the situation in and of itself creates an attendance issue if a child is, and I'm not questioning if they should be off the bus or they shouldn't be off the bus. I'm just saying that they're suspended from the bus. They live 5-10 miles away. They're suspended from the bus, but they can't get to school because they're off the bus. That's the long and the short of that.
We will look at the situation, Pastor Harrison, and maybe at the next meeting be able to come back and give you you and the board an update on that. I know exactly what you're saying, and it does create. If they can't get to school, it will create an attendance issue. So that's something that we can look at. I know that may be a change in some policy, which is fine, to address just what you're saying. Because if I can't get a ride to get to school, I'm going to miss school, and now what happens to my work? So we will come back with some thoughts around that.
I appreciate this discussion, and it does sound like this is not something that would actually affect our 5,200 attendance policy. It might be something in a discipline policy or in a procedure, but according to this attendance policy does demonstrate why that is important, because it would not be considered an excused absence with everything that is listed here. So with that, any further discussion on 5,200 attendance? All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. Next, we have discussion on policy 5136, personal communication devices.
Thank you, Dr. Molnar. So this policy is updated to reflect state law as well as a mandatory Neola update. As you can see, it bans cell phone use in schools for the majority of the time. There are some carve-out exceptions for students on a 504 plan, and also when they're otherwise permitted by their teacher or principal to use those and that kind of technology. There's also the discipline for the use of or the violations of the policy on page 4 through 5. And then we also included, let's see if I could find it here, a policy addition, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, on page 1 concerning after-school activities, and that was for the purposes of clarifying when students would be allowed to have their phones so that they couldn't be disciplined without reason, you know, if they have their cell phones after school and they're still participating in an activity.
Thank you. So the items that are on, because once again, sorry, without the strike through, the items that are on the page 2 where it has the list A through I of violations, is that included in some of the new additions, the revisions to our policy?
Yes, so A through I are all additions to the policy, and that's per state law.
And without the strike-throughs, is it also intended that this was going to be moved, since it's a Neola update, move forward, seen as a first read, and then taken to the board as expeditiously?
Yes, Madam Chair, the administration will request this be a first read.
Any discussion from the committee?
No discussion. Well, I mean, we know how sensitive this is for our students. And so how is this communicated or will be communicated to our students, the new rules?
We would send out a district-wide communication, as well as the building principal would also send out his or her communication that's in alignment with the policy to help our parents understand what the expectations are regarding personal communication devices.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chief of Staff.
Since A through I is new, I ask, the way they're listed, is it in an order, or is it up to, you know, I'm trying to ask how to ask this question. Is it any of these that's possible, or does it need to be A, then B, then C, then D?
You mean like progressive?
Correct.
Yes.
Progressive, thank you.
Progressive. It is a progressive discipline model, and it could jump all the way to G, depending on if there's any extenuating circumstances around the student not wanting to, you know, hand the phone over. I mean, it could vary, but more than likely, it's a progressive discipline model, and so the first infraction would result in a verbal warning, and then so on, as stated in the policy.
Reverend
This- I'm sorry.
I would like to hear from the Director of Security, how this policy is working, how much resources are we putting, how difficult is it with the phones? Is the phones a situation still or not?
Well, yes, the phones are still a situation. How much we have these bags in place already, the Yonder bags, that are utilized. It varies from building to building, but the phones are still create a situation. It has definitely bettered the learning environment. It's less distractive in the classrooms. But, you know, we still have, you know, students that sometimes don't want to go by the rules. So, but the Yonder bags have helped, and it has definitely created a better learning environment, both for the student as well as the instructors.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on 5136 personal communication devices? All right, and with that recommendation then, as the committee, would we like to recognize this as a first read and move to the board for a full read at the next meeting?
So moved. So moved.
All right, thank you. And next on our agenda, we have 404, update from administration for potential new policies for vendors and independent contractors. Are there any updates from administration?
Madam Chair, the administration does not have any updates. However, we have received 4120.10 independent contractors draft example, and I think my recommendation would be, with maybe the approval of the committee, is to review this with legal counsel, and then at our next meeting come back and discuss the potential of the policy, if that would behoove this committee.
All right, and so as the administration does not have a full update, I did, based on our discussion in our last meeting about some of the policies that exist from other schools, and also information related to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and definitions and things like that. I did create a quick, well, it's not quick, it is 2 pages, but potential example of a draft, because I know sometimes it can seem very abstract to create something new. And so with that, I provided one to everyone in the committee today, and I hear the recommendation that we might leave this in discussion, have a review, and potentially have another update from administration the next week. Is there any discussion from the committee?
No, I don't really have, I mean, I don't know what we have in place now. And I'm not sure about the need for this. What do we have in place now?
I could answer, counsel, or if you wish.
Go ahead, Mr. Duffbaugh. Thank you.
Thank you. Our policies, we do have board policies that are centered around ethics and ethics violations, as far as, you know, personal interaction, what board members, whether they have to recuse themselves, whether they should engage in a contractual matter, but it's based off of the ethics laws, but we do have it. That's where most of ours are centered around. And counsel, I don't know if you wish to elaborate on my statement.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the chance to review what Dr. Molinar put together. There's also, I think, and it doesn't go to, I don't believe it goes to vendor relations, but there's another policy, Neola update, that goes to vendors that's in the works. But I don't think it covers with the intention that this has. But like I said, I haven't read it, so I'm not sure.
The policy that
Superintendent, and then Reverend Harrison.
The policy that we currently have, Board Member Sykes, is a longstanding policy that may need some wordsmithing in terms of some, you know, to just bring it up to 2024. But I don't think that it's a policy in its entirety that we need to necessarily totally just revamp and change. But I do agree that we do need to add some additional updates to it that would bring us to 2024.
Oh, no, I would just recommend, Madam Chair, then that we just kind of compare and contrast and see the differences.
Thanks. And Reverend Harrison?
Yeah, I agree. We need to compare and contrast. And the independent contracting is, for lack of anything else, confusing in that the policy may read clear, but we've had problems with independent contractors. You can speak on this, you can't speak on that. You know, this is a conflict. So I think the policy in and of itself needs to be consistent and clear. And maybe it just takes some updating. But I think we need to be consistent and clear with the message that we send. And so that's what I would contribute to this. Look at what we have, look at what's needed, and go from there. But it definitely needs to be addressed, to be clearer.
Madam Chair, let me just try to be clear. I don't know if this would address whether or not an independent contractor can come to the board and speak if they are in negotiations or if they are dealing with another department on their contract. I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, and it puts me in the awkward position.
I don't know. But
Madam Chair, if I may, of me asking a couple of questions. So it's kind of a reverse roles. I mean, was this drafted? Did this come from one document, or was this kind of pulled together from various documents, if you may?
Yes, no, thank you. It was pulled together from several documents. I tried to pull any information I could find from reviewing our district policies. There were no clear district policies about vendors, and so I brought up a few times, we have things on volunteers even, but nothing specifically that discussed vendors. And so as I said when I brought this, I know it can be difficult to discuss something abstract and something invisible, and so I wanted at least something that would start the discussion. I see us nervously starting a discussion. And to be honest, Member Sykes, I really, Co-Chair Sykes, appreciate your question. Does this address what, because this is based off of other schools and the Department of Job and Family Services. So does this address what might be a specific need to Akron Public Schools? Who can discuss what, where, or would that need to be something that is added or changed to this? And so with that, I will say the policy number here, 4120.1, that would be a brand new policy. So even that number, I kind of invented about where I thought it might land.
Okay.
Okay.
But I wanted something for us to discuss.
Okay, and Madam Chair, if I may quickly, I do agree with Member Sykes. I don't know, Reverend Harrison, Member Harrison, if this would address, I think yours is more looking towards public comment policy.
I'm just looking at a clear policy.
Okay.
So not specifically, again, any one thing, but we have sometimes policies that's left up to the interpretation of the department or the person or whomever. So if we just have a clear policy that we all can refer to and make a logical, we could be reasonable with what we're saying. So I'm not speaking of any specifics, just a clear policy. You know, I know some vendors were upset because they were told what they could wear, what they can't wear, where they're vendors. So if we just get a clear policy, this is the authority that independent contractors have, and this is the authority that the district maintains as far as the vendor.
Understood. Madam Chair, may I speak? One thing I just want to be careful about, maybe we should take a little bit of time, is we have a few more Neola policies coming through with procurement, federal. There's another board policy on federal, and then we're also working on a diversity supplier policy. So there's a lot kind of going on. If we could maybe just take a little bit of time and maybe foreseeable looking at maybe in January, it would be my suggestion, because there's a lot of different policies that are ongoing right now with some state updates as well.
Okay.
So I hear a recommendation to compare this to the policies our district has, the policies our district might need, if something like communication would fall under an independent contractor, or maybe a different policy like a communication policy. So how does the committee feel about that presentation from administration in our January meeting to start the year?
So move. That's fine with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 611, we can do this. We are moving on. Policy 9150, school visitors.
Madam Chair, if I may be addressed. So what we did, last time we had questions, several good questions. So what we did is we brought Mr. Al Jones, Director of Safety and Security, who may be able to assist on the questions. And what I wanted to bring to the board's attention as we work through this, one moment. Is we have a policy 9150 that deals with school visitors, and this is incorporating and looking at the whole Raptor system and things that we discussed. And on paragraph 3 of 9150, it states the superintendent shall promulgate such administrative guidelines as are necessary for the protection of students and employees of the district from disruption to the educational program. So what I did and the team did is we went back and looked at the administrative guideline per this policy and are in the process of just completely rewriting the administrative guideline that we would be happy to share with the committee at the appropriate time. It's just about done. So I guess the administration's recommendation would be is rather than rewrite the policy, is rewrite the administrative guideline that has to incorporate a commercial. I wouldn't want to put a commercial name like Raptor in a policy. I think it's better to put it in a guideline because Raptor may go out of business and we may have another company, so we can do an administrative guideline. And I think based on our current analysis of 9150 and the board policy, we're in the process of rewriting based on comments from the committee at our last meeting, trying to incorporate a comprehensive administrative guideline to address those issues. Nevertheless, Mr. Jones is here to maybe help assist with some of the questions that may come up with the Raptor system, if you so want to inquire.
Thank you for that introduction. And yes, I would love to hear some details from Officer Jones. Also, you said they will be dealt with in administrative guidelines. Are there any drafts of those administrative guidelines?
Well, Madam Chair, before we go to that, the question came to my mind when we heard the presentation from our Chief of Staff that information was being gathered to send, or maybe something had already been sent out to the families, and I was just trying to get some general idea as to, I just was not had not been familiar with this particular program. So is it just for visitors? So you get a badge and you know that visitors are on the premises, on the campus, or is it to run information through a system to find out who you actually have in the school and if that person is a sex offender? And then the other question was, and if they are, then who is going to put them out of the school? It was just a number of things that just was not clear.
Okay, so this system
But
is...
before you start,
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chairman, so is this in place now? That's what I'm not even clear on.
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right, it's not in place now.
No, ma'am. Okay, Ms. Seitz, so this system is one that is our visitor system. Just like we have individuals come to our schools today, they present their identification, they write their name. This is going to take the place of that. That's merely what this is. Now, however, when doing this, they'll run their ID, and if they should happen to be a registered sex offender, that does not mean that we're going to kick them out of the school. They are still permitted to be able to visit with their student. That could be done a number of ways. The administrator would come and maybe escort that student that parent to the student, and/or that student could come to the office. merely if the individual is just there to drop something off, they don't have to go through all that. They just drop whatever they're dropping off, and then they leave. The system is just the same as it is right now. The only difference is they're not writing their name. It's the same type of system that we're using currently. They have to be checked through eSchool if they, are registered to be able to have contact with these students. So everything's the same. The only difference is they're not writing their name. If they're going to be in the population, they'll print out a badge. They'll wear that badge while they're within the school building. At the end of their visit, they'll come back to the office. We'll get rid of that badge. It'll have a date, their picture on it, where they're going, and then we'll discard it, and then we'll take them out of the system.
Madam Chair, everything, right now, if you go in and you write your name on, no one is going to look to see if you have a criminal record.
And it does not do that.
It does not do that?
No, it doesn't do that. No,
we're given the
ma'am.
impression that it did do that.
No, it does not do that. The only alert that it will check is if they are in the database as a registered sex offender. That's the only thing it'll do.
So when someone come in now, are they checked in an international database?
They're not. No, they're
So
not.
it's not. So it's a little different.
It is a little different.
little
That is
different.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So that is a difference.
But to your point, they're not checked to see if they have a criminal background, like a criminal. They're not checking to see if you have warrants and things. That's not the purpose of this.
But it is checking to see if you're a sex offender.
It does go out and check the national database to see if you're a registered sex offender. That's a part of the program in the Raptor system.
So that is part of the program.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, remember,
Yes.
Dr. Molinar.
Superintendent.
So just to bring a little bit more clarity to what Mr. Jones is saying, it does not check, there's no way of it checking to know if I have a criminal record coming in the door. But it is set to determine if a person is a sex offender. We will also put additional flags in there. For example, Johnny's mom may say that only his sister can pick him up, right? Well, if the uncle comes to try to pick up Johnny, it might when he puts it in, it's going to flag and say only the sister is permitted by parents. So there are additional flags that we will be putting in there to help support our secretaries or someone that's subbing in that office to know. But you can't turn off the flag for a sex offender because that's a part of embedded within the equipment itself, the program itself. But what we do with that information on our end is what makes the difference. So if someone is a sex offender, they're not going to be told you have to leave the building. We wouldn't know otherwise anything else in terms of criminal behavior because we wouldn't know that. It doesn't tell us that information. It's a visitor management system. I use it as a former principal myself in other places, and it really calculates the people that are coming in and out of your building. It keeps a track of that. So, and there are times when we need that information. And somebody may not have signed in when they went into a building. But through this process, we will be able to have a database of who comes and goes in and out of that building. So it is a system that is used in various districts across the United States. Even in Ohio, several districts are using it.
Sorry, I will ask two questions quickly to Officer Jones and then Reverend Harrison. So in this system, if someone is flagged and they go through and they are flagged and they have been on a registry, and their intent is to go into the building and do something with general population, is that handled differently? Or is it just something that the flag what happens if a flag occurs then?
So as I stated, if they're just there for, and they're going to visit their student, we would leave, that building administrator would either, the building administrator would be notified, and they come, it's no different, we don't get on, Mr. Jones, have a seat, principal will be down. That principal will then say, oh, you're here to see Susan? Okay. We can either go and get Susan. We're not putting them out of the building, and they can visit there in the office, and/or the administrator would walk with them to Susan's classroom.
And then my follow-up is, do we have in the administrative guidelines the hours that we would be using this system for that? I'm thinking of band concerts, basketball games, voting.
That's a good question. It's utilized during the school hours. So the extracurricular activities will still be done as they've always been done. Band, things of that nature, where you go, you sign in, those things will still be done the same way as they're always done. This will only be utilized during the school day, school hours.
And so on election day also then?
On election day, there are no students usually in our buildings on election day.
For primary elections, we have school, and we have voting in the buildings while there are students in school.
Yes, but they generally are not the population. They don't go into the student population, so I don't. It may be used, but I don't see where we would turn away an individual that's coming to vote, and they're not with the general population of the students. No student contact. We don't have to worry about it.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions, but I have a recommendation about the system as well. Some of the things that were said, the flags. So the system is so large. What database flags sex offenders? Where is that query asked of? Are we going through like a leads? Or are we going? How are we identifying sex offenders?
I don't know the software. It's a national database that is used, sex offender database.
Okay.
That query is done. It's a national query that is done.
So, Madam Chair, I would say that it would be appropriate to have the company do a informational session, because this system is so large, and we may only be doing it for 2 portions of what it can do, but the system may be able to do 50 things. And so how do we stay within what we say we're going to stay? And that would be my concern, because you can turn on different features, and once it's in the buildings, it's in the buildings. So how do we stay within what we're saying we're going to bring it in as? We're going to only use it for sex offenders. We're going to make sure that people have badges on. My concern is, and I certainly want to keep our kids safe, but my concern is I also want to make sure that parents are comfortable coming in the buildings. I want to make sure that we have the manpower. Okay, because it seems like a great thing, but if you get someone in and now we got a situation, how do we address the situation? Do we have staff on hand to address the situation? So I think we need to learn the breadth of this system.
So, Pastor Harrison, again, having used this system myself as a principal, it really just becomes a part of what happens when people come into a school building. Like, it's not an additional extra set of work that has to happen with this system. I mean, I come in, The parents actually sign in on the system itself and do what it has to do, and it'll print out their badge and they go wherever they need to go. This is not about, I don't want us to get hung up on the sex offender part of it, because it's a visitor management system that will let us know if a person coming into the building is a sex offender. And again, on our end, we would be working with our school secretaries and principals on client services. When people, we're not going to treat people disrespectfully because something pops up on that. Sometimes they will tell you before they even come in. And that's the reason why I wanted to phase it in so that we can afford an opportunity for our families to be able to be trained on it, to be aware of it before we just do anything and roll it out, so that when they come in, they'll be comfortable with it, and let them try it and experience it before we do an entire school district.
And I'm not caught up on the sex offender part of it. I'm caught up on the part of it that the system is so large. I'm caught up on the part that we're taking people's information, and to say we're not going to treat people differently. The system is designed to treat people differently just by the design, to identify people, to keep the number of people so we know who's in the building, we know where they are. But it's also a lot of information that you're trusting a system with. And systems are only as trustworthy as the people who operate them. So when you give me your information and I say I'm only going to do X, Y with it, I just think that we need to know, not from personal experience, but we need to know how the system operates, the breadth of the system. What can it do? Who can it identify? I think that is, before we bring in something that is this large, and we say we're only going to use it for these two things, but it does 70 other things.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate this discussion. I know we discussed briefly, I brought up administrative guidelines. Did we bring drafts of administrative guidelines? Because I think some of these questions, what are we going to do with it, would be answered through those.
So when Mr. Hanshaw presented on the Raptor system, one of the things that he said it is not, so one thing that it is not, it doesn't do background checks. So the visitor management system does not conduct a background check. And it's definitely not something to exclude the public. The system's not designed to keep people out. And then it's definitely not a replacement for vigilance, like Mr. Jones spoke about as relates to, we're still going to use our e-school system. So if you tell me that you're coming to pick up a student and you want access to a student, I'm still going to use my e-school, or you say you want to come and sit in your child's classroom. So Ms. Molinar, I need you to go ahead and put your information in the system, and I'll give you your sticker, and then you would go on down to the classroom. If I don't know that you're Mrs. Molinar, I'm still going to look in the system to make sure that the ID and the guardian name matches the student's name in the e-school system. So we're still going to need to use our e-school system to tell us who the guardian and the parents are. So that part is not eliminated. And so we'll still have to use vigilance on our side. And so it does not replace the need for human vigilance as relates to security personnel and the other security measures that we have in place when people want access to our scholars when they come into the building. And so if you say to the guardian, right now, I'm asking for your ID, and I'm looking to see if that ID matches what we have in our e-school system. And that's the same thing we would still do with the visitor management system, except now I'm going to print a sticker and put it on you that has your picture, the date, and where you're going into the building.
So in policy 9150 that we already have on file, in the 4th paragraph, it says, rules regarding entry of persons other than students, staff, and faculty upon school grounds or premises shall be posted conspicuously at or near the entrance at such grounds or premises. So does this change the rules that would be posted? How does this change? Do we have drafts of what that change of rules would be?
So right now, buildings have up that ID is required, and so we would modify that to say ID is required, and so is the use of the Raptor system if you're needing access to the building. So that's something that we would work on as relates to the wording of signage, to update that to go along with this new process of signing visitors into the building.
Thank you. And just a minute. And also, in these administrative guidelines, one thing that's in here is and I'm just looking at immediately, I don't see the specificity in here, and it might be in here, about the hours and the ages of visitors that would need to be included. If you bring a guest or something. So I think these are opportunities. I want to give Reverend Harrison some time, but being that this is a large discussion, I'm leaning towards continuing this discussion in December, but I recognize you, Reverend Harrison.
Can you tell me everything this system does? I know what we say we're going to use, but what does this system do? What can this system check?
It's only a visitor management system.
No, it's much larger than that, sir. It's much larger than that.
Okay.
So I think I would need to get that from Mr. Hanshaw as relates to
Okay.
the capabilities of the Raptor technology visitor management system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Madam Chair, but Mr. Hanshaw, we invited him here tonight, but he had a personal conflict. So he can be the person who's better off answering some of the technological questions as well as what the capacity of the matter is.
Thank you. So it is my recommendation we continue this discussion in our December 19th meeting. Included in that discussion would be, hours, ages, examples of signage, how that changes our signage. And additionally, I'm concerned about the contract. This is a 36-month contract that we started in February. I'd like to know an update in December. How many months do we have left on the contract that has been approved? And anything else from the committee?
Madam Chair, just clarification. Who is Mr. Hanshaw?
He's the technology director.
He's the director of technology. He's our IT.
Within the Akron School?
Within Akron Public Schools,
He's
yes.
not an owner of the technology?
No.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
APS IT director.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe that contract is not, it's a 3-year contract. It's not up until February 2027, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll check it, make sure.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. Moving on, 406, Neola updates, please.
So what you'll see in front of you is just something that we're keeping on the agenda. We've gone over the fact that we have a slew of Neola updates to get through, and the administration is working to produce those at this committee.
Thank you. And we got 2 through today, so it's working. So I hear it is the recommendation then for us to keep this item available in discussion for the future.
So moved.
Thank you. All right. Next, 407, dress code update from administration.
Madam Chair, the dress code policy that we currently have, we reviewed this summer. The board voted to suspend the policy for this particular school year. And prior to me arriving, I think right after COVID, is when the students returned back to school. but it was suspended then because they were not using uniforms anymore, just the regular clothing for the students. And so last year they used regular clothing. This year they're using regular clothing. My recommendation is that we suspend the policy indefinitely. The policy itself is really a very well-written policy. The implementation is the part that needs to be worked on, and that's what we've been working with principals on this year. There would be some tweaks, a couple of wordsmithing tweaks that would need to occur with the policy. But if the question on the table is, should we go back to, because that's the decision that would need to be made by the board for this upcoming school year, the 25-26 school year, my recommendation is that we would revisit the policy that we currently have to make the adjustments to it. But I would leave the students in the state where it is now, wearing their regular clothes to school. I mean, I'm actually a uniform person. I prefer to see, but I also know that it's a big expense on parents having to buy uniforms and clothes. And so my recommendation would be that the board consider, at least for another year, suspending that policy, but we do need to visit it. But the part that we're working on is the implementation of the policy. This summer, I sent 2 or 3, was it 3 mail-outs? I think it was 2 or 3 mail-outs that I sent with the policy to parents. One thing I do know is that it is being enforced in the schools. There is work to be done there, but it is being enforced in the schools. And again, there is work to be done. We still have some students that will come to school in what they shouldn't be wearing, and the principals are dealing with that at the school level. And so that would be my recommendation, at least for this next school year, that we would leave it as it currently is. However, we do need to revisit the policy, but I sent home stressing the policy for parents this summer, and we plan to do another reminder of that before they leave for the holiday, reminding them again, which is what we've been doing throughout the year.
So, Mr. Superintendent, I hear your recommendation that we suspend the policy and then revisit the policy. I heard that recommendation months ago when we suspended the policy, that we would revisit the policy. And respectfully, this was the time, this was the space that we were going to start that conversation. That's what we mentioned in our meeting last month, because when we suspended the policy last time, we said we can't just keep suspending a policy year after year. Bring it up, suspend it, bring it up, suspend it, because then we're constantly deciding when we could just have a new policy. And so when we asked while we were getting ready for this school year, we were told by you that we would have a new policy around wintertime, around January. So here we are around wintertime, and I really want to have this conversation soon because families are coming to us and people are shopping now for clothes. Decisions on what people are going to purchase and buy now is affected by what is or is not going to be allowed in school next school year. And so that was our discussion here at this meeting last month, that we wanted to try to give families a heads up on what types of clothing would be permitted or not be permitted for the 26 school year, so that we can decide, do you get Crocs for Christmas or not? Those are the big conversations. Right. It must be in sport mode. But those types of decisions. So with your information now and this, I think I move to say, can we have a draft of that sample policy at our, or we'll keep this in discussion, and you can bring that to our December meeting?
Yeah, the policy is very well written. There were just a couple of things that we saw, and I think one of them, it was either Crocs or something that wasn't on there that we felt needed to be added on there. But the policy itself, I'm just telling you that the implementation is, on our part, is the part that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would
Thank you.
just move that we, look at the policy at our next board meeting.
But we can
Yes.
bring it with a couple of changes that we're recommending.
Yes.
All right.
But it wasn't the policy that was the issue. I think it was whether or not the board would allow us the kids to stay in uniforms, regular dress clothes, or would they want them to go back to uniforms, which is what we were talking about, I think, back in April or May.
So you can bring that to our December meeting, and we will continue that in discussion in our December meeting. And so with that, unless there's further discussion on dress code from the committee, thank you.
No, Madam Chair, just to make it clear, you're saying that the superintendent can, one, we would like to see the dress code update that he's mentioned, and two, that he would formally request that the board look at keeping the current policy, which is street clothing as opposed to uniforms.
Yes.
that what
If
you
that
said?
is his wish.
Yeah, if that's what you,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you. Section 5, unfinished business. I do not believe we have any unfinished business. Section 6, new business. Is there any new business from the committee?
No, Madam Chair.
You are recognized, Reverend Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You know you're not on the committee, right?
Yes, yes. That's why I'm bringing it to new business. Madam Chair, there is a need to revisit the Chief Diversity Office policy. And I think not the position, but the title. I think we need to look at the title, and have that, maybe if you can put it on the agenda. I think that we may run into some issues with state funding because of the title, as we're looking at some House bills that are currently flowing there. So I just think we should look at that, put that on a future agenda, because the title mentions diversity. So if we can maybe defer to our legal counsel, or look at the House bills that's been introduced. So we may need to look at the title. I know that is a board-created position. So just the title, not the job itself.
Yeah, thank you. We can look into this. I'm not sure if this is necessarily a policy issue. I'm quickly trying to skim to see if that title is something that's within the policy, or if that's something that the district would do through administrative guidelines. I don't know. Mr. Duffbaugh, do you know if there's a policy with that title?
It's in the policy. The title is in the policy, embedded in the policy.
Correct. I don't know if you heard, it's embedded in the policy.
Right.
But I don't know if it's entitled.
The board created the position, and they intentionally titled the position. And so I would.
So it's mentioned in our, the position is mentioned in our policies. Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, Pastor Harrison, Member Harrison, you would like possibly legal to review what we have to see if there's anything that is potentially vulnerable?
We may need to retitle
name,
the
the
position.
name. Just change the name.
Just change the name. We may need to retitle the position, I guess is the.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Sorry, I think that it went over my head a little bit.
Because
at first. Thank you.
I think you're saying there's some legislation coming out of Columbus that basically saying we're striking everything that says chief diversity, any diversity,
Yes,
anything.
so,
Yeah.
chief strategy or whatever, but just the
But
name.
not diversity. Strike diversity.
Yeah, we will look into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other new business from the table? Sorry. Okay, with that, I do have a couple items of new business. First, I would like to add, I see we have 4 items for our next meeting, so there should be time, the opportunity to receive our updated organizational chart. We do have a policy 123001 administrative guidelines about our organizational chart. And so since our administrative team will be here already on the dress code, if we can also have receive the updated organizational chart, if that is okay with the committee.
So move.
Okay, thank you. And the other item I want to discuss as potential new business, our next meeting is December 19th, and I am aware that our SRO contract is up December 30th, and I wanted to ask the committee, is this a contract that we would like to review in committee before it goes to the full board?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the SRO is a pretty sensitive contract, and I don't know if I don't know. I need legal or somebody to talk about that.
I don't think, right?
So, thank you. And so as far as, is there any other, I'll ask also, is there any other discussion? Reverend Harrison.
And we have our counsel here. With the SRO contract, is that because of the nature of the contract, because of the nature of what we may be pending, may be looking at, is that something that would be looked at in an executive session first?
Thank you for that. And I guess I sometimes I jump ahead of myself. So I will apologize to everybody for that. But I was wondering if, or at what point, the Legal Contracts Committee, we should discuss what type of contracts we do want to bring to committee, or what type of contracts do go through committee. Because in my tenure so far as chair of this committee, we have dealt almost exclusively with board policy. And so I don't know if we want to have a discussion in the December meeting about contracts or expectations on contracts. And so maybe that single contract was not a great first example. But I don't know if there's any other discussion on bringing contracts to committee.
I think like an example of us looking into the guidelines around vendors kind of touches on information related to contracts. And so like procurement, things, bids, all that is in policy as it relates to contract. So I'm thinking that's how it's embedded within this committee is what I'm thinking. But I'm thinking the contract regarding things that our legal counsel negotiates with other legal counsels, that probably will be like an executive session, but I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But I was just, when you said that, it just triggered like, oh, vendor, that relates to contract, procurement, bids, and all those are in our policy, and it's all related to contracts.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would say that those, looking at the agenda, those business we look at plenty of contracts that come through from the business department area. But I think those legal negotiation, the reason why I hesitate was, I know it's really between it, we got the city of Akron and Akron school system and the negotiations and all kinds of things with that one. But I definitely think that more of the contracts should come before this committee before we have it on the floor for a final vote. So I guess the question would be which one of those the attorneys would recommend that we can review as opposed to those that's subject to various legal interpretations.
Thanks, and I appreciate you also understanding what I mean versus what I say sometimes, because as we are preparing, and when we get our agendas, you said we have all those contracts in the business affairs section. So should we consider just having a section in this agenda where we have upcoming contracts, and that way, even if we don't necessarily discuss them all, we see what's going to the agenda, so the agenda is not the first time that we see them?
Yeah, and I would say, Madam Chair, that you may remember that the board president mentioned that maybe that we're going to start looking at work groups more, and that may be where we would also look at a number of the contracts coming through. But there's enough to share, for sure.
All right. Well, I appreciate this short discussion, and I think we're meeting with the board president in around January also.
To talk about
the work groups. And
I
so,
think it may be December.
No, it's December. December 9th is the work session. December 11th is the board meeting.
Yeah.
okay, so then December 9th,
Yeah.
if the committee might say we can take a section and have them here, and then we would then probably start around like first of the year or something.
Yeah, or at least have a discussion with the board as a whole as to how we should handle that with our legal advisors, I would say.
Did we deal with the SRO contract?
I was trying to insert
okay.
into the conversation
Okay.
what you were asking. I think Board Member Sykes, I think she probably articulated it well. Right now, that is being dealt with legal right now. And I can almost bank on there having to be a special meeting just for that particular contract, depending upon what occurs between the two attorneys.
All right, thank you, everyone. Is there any other discussion of new business?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, so policy status review, the rundown of everything for our December meeting. Before our December meeting, we have 3 policies heading to the board for a second reading: 8510 wellness, 5200 attendance, and 5136 personal communication devices. We have 0 policies headed to our December meeting for a first read, but we have several items for discussion. The contract title of Chief Diversity Officer, school dress code, school visitors, the organizational chart, Neola update will remain in discussion, and then we have on deck, which will be a new item for us that I think we'll leave for now an unfinished business, 4120 ICs for the January meeting. Is there anything that I have forgotten?
Sounds good.
Well, with that, we are 6 minutes early, even with everything. So I will call this meeting adjourned at 6:54.
Thank you.